The warriors of Stellara meet their match. Oh, let me tell you about the time we, the mighty Stellaran Empire, made complete fools of ourselves. But first, you need to understand just how insufferably superior we thought we were. Picture the most arrogant, self-important society you can think of, then multiply that by 1,000. That was us. We Stellarans pride ourselves on being the perfect warrior race. Every single one of us stands at least 8 feet tall, with skin that shimmers like polished chrome and muscles that would make a battle tank feel inadequate. Our youngest children can lift what most species would consider heavy machinery, and we consider arm wrestling with cargo shuttles a light warm-up exercise. Commander Lyra Vex, our esteemed leader, and by esteemed, I mean she once bench-pressed an entire battlefield command center to win her position, loved to remind us daily about our genetic superiority. She would stride through the Great Hall of Victory, her footsteps literally causing mini earthquakes, pointing at the countless trophies we had collected from conquered civilizations. Look at these pathetic specimens, she would boom, her voice rattling the reinforced windows. The Centaurians with their weak exoskeletons, the Proxima Colony with their reliance on powered armor. None can match the pure physical perfection of the Stellaran form. We ate this stuff up, by the way. Our history books were less documentation and more like a continuous highlight reel of Stellaran warriors doing increasingly ridiculous feats of strength. My personal favorite was the chapter about General Astroblade using a small moon as a bowling ball to knock out an enemy fleet. Was it completely true? Who cares? It made us feel amazing about ourselves. Then our long-range observation team discovered Earth. Captain Novastorm, who headed our reconnaissance division, brought the first reports to the High Command. She could barely contain her laughter during the presentation. The humans were so small. Their strongest warriors barely reached our shoulder height, and their muscles. Please, we had seen more impressive physiques on our household cleaning drones. Supreme Commander Novastorm said, trying to maintain her professional composure but failing miserably. These humans seem to think they are a dominant species. They have something called professional wrestling, which they consider impressive displays of strength. Watch this. The holoscreen displayed what appeared to be 2 humans dramatically throwing each other around a squared circle. The entire High Command burst into uncontrollable laughter. Commander Vex actually had to sit down. She was laughing so hard her armor was rattling. They consider this combat, she wheezed, wiping tears from her eyes. This is what passes for warrior culture on their world. Little did we know that our overconfidence was about to bite us right in our chrome-plated posteriors. But that's the thing about us Stellarans, we were so busy flexing our muscles, we forgot that strength isn't everything. Though I have to admit, watching Commander Vex cry from laughter was pretty entertaining. If only we had known what was coming next. After our initial discovery of Earth, the High Command decided to conduct a thorough analysis of human military capabilities. And by thorough, I mean we spent about 15 minutes watching their action movies and decided we had seen enough. The arrogance in that room was so thick you could have carved a statue out of it. Captain Novastorm stood before the Strategic Assessment Council, presenting her findings with all the seriousness of a comedy show host. Behold, she announced, bringing up a hologram of a human tank, their most powerful ground vehicle. Our analysis shows it can be stopped by, wait for it, rocks. Large rocks. They call them tank traps, I am not making this up. The council chamber erupted in snorts and guffaws. General Astroblade was practically wheezing. Rocks? They stop their war machines with rocks? My youngest hatchling plays with bigger obstacles in the nursery. Commander Vex wiped a tear from her eye as Novastorm continued her presentation. It gets better, the captain said, barely containing her own laughter. They're elite soldiers. They have to train for years to carry equipment that weighs less than our formal dinnerware. And this is the best part, they have weight limits on their combat gear, because it might be too heavy. The laughter grew so loud it cracked 3 reinforced viewing screens. Lieutenant Petra Starfire, our youngest tactical officer, actually fell out of her chair. Too heavy, she gasped between fits of giggles. Did they evolve from those small furry creatures they keep as pets? What do they call them, cats? Their aerial combat vehicles are equally amusing, Novastorm continued, displaying footage of Earth's most advanced fighter jets. They're quite proud of breaking what they call the sound barrier. Meanwhile, our cargo shuttles break that by accident while parking. The planning session for Earth's conquest looked more like a party game than a military strategy meeting. Officers were calling out increasingly ridiculous invasion plans, each one more absurd than the last. "I say we send in Junior Cadet Squadron 6, suggested Colonel Maya Thunder. "You know, the ones who just started basic training last week? They could use the practice." Commander Vex shook her head, still chuckling. No, that would be overkill. "I have a better idea. Remember that malfunctioning cleaning drone that keeps trying to polish everyone's armor while they're still wearing it? Let's send that. At least we'll get some entertainment value out of this conquest." The final invasion plan was drafted on what humans would call a cocktail napkin, though our cocktails could dissolve said napkin instantly. It consisted of 3 phases. Phase 1, land on their planet, preferably somewhere dramatic, like one of their major cities. Phase 2, flex muscles menacingly. Phase 3, accept their immediate surrender, while trying not to laugh too hard. "Should we perhaps study their combat techniques more closely?" suggested Lieutenant Starfire, momentarily showing a glimpse of rational thought. The room fell silent for a brief moment before everyone burst into renewed laughter. "What combat techniques?" Commander Vex replied, wiping away more tears of mirth. "Have you seen what they call martial arts? They spend years learning how to break boards. Boards, made of wood. Why not just walk around them?" The meeting concluded with the selection of our invasion force, a small scout team led by Captain Nova Storm. Their mission was simple: go to Earth, show off a bit, and report back on how quickly the humans surrendered. We even packed special cameras to document what we assumed would be a highly entertaining conquest. As Nova Storm's team prepared for departure, Commander Vex gave them their final orders: try not to traumatize them too much with your superiority. We want them capable of serving the Empire, not cowering in their primitive dwellings forever. If only we had known that the humans were about to teach us the greatest lesson in our species' history, that underestimating your opponent is the surest path to having your chrome-plated ego handed back to you in pieces. Our first landing on Earth was planned with all the careful consideration of a toddler choosing ice cream flavors. Captain Nova Storm selected Times Square in New York City because, as she put it, if we're going to humiliate a species, we might as well do it where everyone can watch. The scout ship descended through Earth's atmosphere at noon, our chrome hull gleaming in the sunlight. We expected screaming crowds, mass panic, maybe even some primitive weapons fire that would bounce harmlessly off our hull. Instead, we got camera phones. Hundreds of them. Some humans even posed for selfies with our ship in the background. "Are they taking pictures?" Lieutenant Starfire asked, bewildered. "Don't they realize we're here to conquer them?" Nova Storm's eye twitched slightly. Maybe they can't comprehend our threatening presence. Let's give them a proper Stellaran entrance. The landing ramp descended with our patented thunderous boom, accompanied by our standard fog effects, because if you're going to conquer a planet, you might as well do it with style. Nova Storm led our team of 6 warriors down the ramp, each of us striking our most intimidating poses. A small human child pointed at us and shouted, "Look, Mom, Comic-Con is doing street promotion." That wasn't quite the reaction we were hoping for. Things got even more confusing when we encountered our first Earth military response team. A group of soldiers from something called the National Guard approached us. They were led by a human female who introduced herself as Lieutenant Amanda Chen. She barely came up to our midsection, and yet she showed absolutely no sign of fear. "Welcome to Earth," she said, as if heavily armed 8-foot-tall chrome warriors descended from the sky every Tuesday. "I'm guessing you're not here for the hot dog eating contest." Nova Storm attempted to demonstrate our superior strength by lifting a nearby abandoned car over her head. "Behold the might of the Stellaran Empire," she declared. Lieutenant Chen looked unimpressed. "Nice, but you might want to put that down before you get a parking ticket. This is New York, after all." We were baffled. Where was the terror, the awe, the immediate surrender? Things got even more interesting when we decided to demonstrate our combat prowess. Nova Storm challenged their soldiers to a friendly sparring match, thinking it would be a quick way to establish dominance. She selected what appeared to be the smallest human from their group, a compact, muscular male who introduced himself as Sergeant Mike Rodriguez. What happened next still gives me nightmares. Rodriguez moved like water, using Nova Storm's own strength against her. Every time she tried to grab him, he wasn't there. When she attempted to pin him down, somehow she ended up face first on the ground. It was like trying to wrestle with a ghost who knew exactly where to push to make you fall over your own feet. "That was fun," Rodriguez said cheerfully, helping us stun Nova Storm up. "Anyone else want to try? We've got a great MMA gym around the corner." Meanwhile, Lieutenant Chen was casually chatting with Starfire about our ship's propulsion system while doing one-armed push-ups. Just doing them. Like it was nothing. Between sets, she was snacking on something called protein bars and discussing quantum physics. "Is she showing off?" Starfire whispered to me, genuine confusion in her voice. "Impossible," I replied, though I was starting to have doubts. "They're supposed to be primitive." The final straw came when we witnessed something called a CrossFit competition happening in a nearby park. Humans of all sizes were lifting weights, climbing ropes, and performing feats of endurance that made even our warriors pause. Nova Storm gathered us for a quick huddle. "Nobody sends this footage back to command," she hissed. "We need to reassess our initial assessment." "Should we still proceed with Phase 2?" Flex Muscles menacingly asked Starfire. Nova Storm watched as a human female deadlifted what appeared to be twice her body weight, while another did something called muscle-ups on gymnastics rings. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "we should consider a more diplomatic approach." And that was just our first hour on Earth. Little did we know, the humans were just warming up. After our initial shock, Lieutenant Chen suggested we might want to learn more about Earth's combat traditions. Looking back, I suspect she was trying not to laugh at our increasingly bewildered expressions as she took us on what she called a quick tour of New York's fighting styles. Our first stop was a boxing gym. Now, we Stellarans believe in straightforward combat. Grab something heavy, preferably a vehicle or small building, and throw it at your enemy. These humans, though, they had turned punching into an art form. "This is ridiculous," Nova Storm declared, watching a lightweight boxer dancing around the ring. "Why waste energy moving around so much? Just stand and fight." The boxer, overhearing this, invited Nova Storm to spar. 3 minutes later, our mighty captain was panting, unable to land a single hit on her apparently liquid-like opponent. The human hadn't even broken a sweat. "Would you like some water?" the boxer asked kindly. "We've got another 2 rounds to go." Nova Storm's face turned a darker shade of chrome. 2 more rounds. Next was a Brazilian jiu-jitsu dojo. We watched in fascination as humans twisted themselves into positions that made our rigid chrome bodies ache just looking at them. A small human female, who couldn't have weighed more than 130 pounds, was efficiently choking out opponents twice her size. "But where's the honor in ground fighting?" Lieutenant Starfire protested. The instructor, a gentle-looking man named Professor Carlos, smiled. "Would you like to experience the honor firsthand?" Starfire declined, suddenly very interested in examining the ceiling tiles. The real eye-opener came when Chen took us to watch something called an ultramarathon. Humans, running, for hours, days even, just running. "They do this for fun?" I asked, watching runners pass by on their 47th hour. "Some do it competitively," Chen explained. "Others just want to test their limits." "What happens when they get tired?" Starfire asked. "They keep going. But when they reach their physical limit, they keep going. But surely when their bodies tell them to stop, they keep going." We watched in stunned silence as a 65-year-old human grandmother passed by, cheerfully waving while maintaining a pace that would have exhausted our elite troops. The day continued with more surprises. We witnessed parkour practitioners treating the city like their personal playground, climbers scaling sheer walls with their bare hands, and something particularly terrifying called hot yoga. "The room is deliberately heated to this temperature?" Nova Storm asked, watching humans contort themselves in a 105-degree room. "Helps with flexibility," Chen explained, casually folding herself into a pretzel shape. By evening, our entire team was sitting in a sports bar, drinking something called protein shakes. Our chrome digestive systems couldn't handle alcohol, and trying to process everything we'd seen. "Did you know," Starfire said, scrolling through her newly acquired phone, "that humans have over 3,700 documented forms of martial arts? We have exactly 1 hit things until they stop moving." Nova Storm was watching a UFC fight on the bar's screen, taking notes. "Their weakness was supposed to be their small size," she muttered. "But they've turned it into an advantage. They're like combat scientists." The final blow to our warrior pride came when Chen casually mentioned passive resistance and had to explain the concept of winning without fighting at all. "You mean to tell me," Nova Storm said slowly, "that some of humanity's greatest warriors won their battles by refusing to fight?" "Sometimes the strongest person is the one who chooses not to use their strength," Chen replied, and then added with a grin, "But we're also pretty good at using it when we need to. Want to see our Olympic weightlifting team?" Nova Storm quickly declined, rubbing her still sore jaw from the boxing incident. As we prepared to return to our ship for the night, I overheard Nova Storm making a private communication to command. "Recommend immediate revision of conquest strategy," she whispered. "Also, requesting permission to enroll in something called Pilates for tactical research purposes, of course." We came to Earth expecting to find weakness. Instead, we found humans had turned their perceived weaknesses into strengths, and more importantly, they had about 1,000,000 different ways to prove it. Word of our reconnaissance mission gone wrong reached Commander Lyra Vex back on our homeworld. The response was, shall we say, not quite what we expected. Instead of ordering an immediate retreat to preserve what was left of our dignity, she decided to come to Earth personally. Because obviously the solution to our embarrassment was to add more embarrassment. Clearly, she announced upon landing her personal battle cruiser in Central Park, destroying several hot dog stands in the process. "My warriors have gone soft. The humans must have some sort of mind control technology. Perhaps it's in these protein shakes you keep drinking." Nova Storm tried to explain. "Commander, you don't understand. These humans, they're different." "Nonsense," Vex boomed, her voice rattling the windows of nearby buildings. "I hereby issue a formal challenge to Earth's mightiest warrior. Let us settle this the traditional Stellaran way." Lieutenant Chen, who had been quietly enjoying a smoothie nearby, raised an eyebrow. "The traditional Stellaran way?" "Yes, a series of combat trials to prove superiority once and for all," Vex flexed, causing her chrome armor to gleam blindingly in the sunlight. Several tourists complained about the glare ruining their photos. "I see," Chen said, sipping her smoothie. "And if Earth wins?" "Then we will," Vex stuttered, clearly having not expected this question. "We will acknowledge your species as equals and establish diplomatic relations." "And if you win?" "Then your planet pledges allegiance to the Stellaran Empire." Chen made a quick call to Admiral Jack Morrison at Earth Defense Force headquarters. The conversation was surprisingly short and punctuated by what sounded suspiciously like laughter. "Earth accepts your challenge," Chen announced. "We'll hold the competition in 1 week at the Olympic Stadium. That should give us time to prepare and sell tickets." "Sell tickets?" Nova Storm asked weakly. "Oh yes," Chen grinned. "This is going to be quite the show." The next week was a blur of activity. Commander Vex spent her time training by lifting progressively larger objects, cars, buses, and at one point, an entire food truck. The owner was compensated, though he did complain about the chrome handprints on his kitchen equipment. Meanwhile, Earth's selection process for their champion was unlike anything we'd ever seen. Instead of choosing their physically largest warrior, they held what they called trials. Competitors from various disciplines came together in a display that had our entire scout team questioning everything we thought we knew about combat. There were gymnasts who moved like they had no bones, marathon runners with endless endurance, martial artists who could strike faster than our eyes could track, and military specialists who seemed to know 1,000 ways to turn any situation to their advantage. The chosen champion wasn't announced until the day before the competition. When Lieutenant Chen stepped forward, Commander Vex actually laughed. "This is your mightiest warrior, the one who's been giving us tours." Chen just smiled, that same serene smile she'd worn since our first meeting. That should have been our first warning. The pre-competition preparation was another culture shock. While Vex was busy practicing her intimidation poses and working on her victory speech, Chen was going through what she called her normal routine. This involved morning yoga, a light 10-mile run, some rock climbing, and what she called active recovery, which looked more intense than our military's extreme training programs. Nova Storm, who had been observing both camps, pulled me aside the night before the competition. "I just checked the betting odds," she whispered, showing me her phone. "The humans are heavily favoring Chen." "But Commander Vex can lift a tank with one arm," I protested. "Yes," Nova Storm replied, watching Chen casually complete her 1,000th one-armed push-up while reading a quantum physics textbook. but I'm starting to think we might be missing something about how humans measure strength. The evening before the competition, Commander Vex made one final attempt at intimidation, storming into Chen's preparation area. She found the lieutenant calmly drinking tea and completing a crossword puzzle. "Aren't you going to prepare for tomorrow?" Vex demanded. Chen looked up from her puzzle. "Oh, I am prepared. Would you like some tea? It's chamomile. Good for pre-competition jitters." As we left, I heard Vex muttering, "What in the galaxy have we gotten ourselves into?" Looking back, that was probably the wisest thing our commander had said since arriving on Earth. The Olympic Stadium was packed to capacity on competition day. Humans had turned this into a full-blown spectacle, complete with merchandise. I spotted several children wearing chrome-colored t-shirts with Team Vex and Team Chen printed on them. Commander Vex strode into the arena in her full battle regalia, servos whirring, chrome armor gleaming. Lieutenant Chen walked in wearing simple athletic gear, and that unnervingly calm smile. "First trial, raw strength," the announcer boomed. Vex grinned. This was her specialty. The challenge? Lifting a progressively loaded platform. Vex went first, easily hoisting weights that made the stadium structure creak. When she reached 50 tons, she turned to Chen with a triumphant smirk. Chen approached the platform, studied it for a moment, then reached for a lever underneath. The entire weight balanced perfectly on a fulcrum, requiring minimal effort to lift. The crowd went wild. "That's cheating," Vex protested. "Actually," Chen replied, "the rules just said to lift the platform. They didn't specify how." The second trial was endurance. A marathon obstacle course around the stadium. Vex started strong, literally plowing through walls instead of going around them. By mile 10, her chrome joints were squeaking. By mile 15, she was questioning her life choices. Chen maintained the same steady pace throughout, even stopping to sign autographs, while Vex struggled to keep her hydraulics from overheating. The final trial was combat. Vex charged in like a chrome bull, swinging with enough force to reshape continental plates. Chen moved like water, redirecting every attack. The more Vex punched, the more she hit nothing but air, until finally. "Did she just Nova Storm?" gasped. "Use Vex's own momentum," to Starfire added. "Make her punch herself," I finished. The mighty Commander Vex, terror of 12-star systems, was lying flat on her back, taken down by her own strength. Chen helped her up. "Great match. Your form is excellent, by the way. Have you ever considered training in Aikido?" Vex stared at her, chrome jaw slightly dented. "I do not understand. How can you be so strong by not being strong?" "Strength isn't just about muscles or chrome plating," Chen explained. "It's about understanding yourself, your opponent, and how to use what you have effectively." The stadium erupted in cheers as Chen was declared the winner. Vex, to her credit, took her defeat with surprising grace. She even asked Chen for training tips. As we watched them discussing technique, Nova Storm turned to me. "You know what the really scary part is?" "What?" Chen wasn't even Earth's strongest warrior. She was just the one who happened to be free this weekend. The treaty negotiations were held in what humans called a yoga studio at Chen's insistence. Commander Vex sat cross-legged on a mat, trying to maintain her dignity while struggling with something called the lotus position. "You know," Vex said, wincing as she attempted to straighten her chrome-plated spine, "when I imagined signing a peace treaty with Earth, I didn't think it would involve so much stretching." Admiral Morrison, representing Earth, was casually doing handstand push-ups while discussing trade agreements. We find it helps keep the mind flexible too. Speaking of which, about that cultural exchange program. That's how, 3 months later, I found myself watching the first batch of Stellaran warriors attending a hot yoga class. Our chrome bodies weren't built for such contortions, but we were too proud to admit defeat. The humans called the squeaking of our joints ambient music. Commander Vex threw herself into learning human combat styles with surprising enthusiasm. She became particularly fond of capoeira, though the other students complained about getting dented by her chrome legs during the spinning kicks. Nova Storm opened the first CrossFit gym on Stellaran, introducing our warriors to the concept of functional fitness. The sight of mighty Stellaran warriors doing burpees and complaining about something called leg day became commonplace. Lieutenant Starfire started a martial arts fusion program, combining Stellaran strength with human techniques. The result was a fighting style that looked like a cross between ballet and a construction site accident, but it was surprisingly effective. But the real kicker: the humans started learning from us too. They incorporated our strength training into their routines, though they drew the line at lifting actual spacecraft. Something about insurance liability. 1 year after our failed invasion attempt, we held the first intergalactic fitness games. The event featured everything from traditional Stellaran heavy lifting to human parkour. The highlight was watching a human grandmother teach a Stellaran war chief proper breathing techniques for meditation. Today, walking through the streets of any Stellaran city, you'll find chrome warriors practicing Tai Chi in the parks, human trainers teaching proper lifting form to our youngsters, and mixed martial arts dojos where the sound of clanking metal mixes with traditional training calls. Commander Vex even started a motivational speaking tour, titled "How Getting My Chrome Butt Kick Saved Our Species." It's quite popular. As for me, I'm writing this from my New Earth apartment, preparing for my first competition in something called synchronized swimming. Yes, we rushed a bit in the pool, but the humans introduced us to something called WD-40, and well, that's another story entirely. The greatest lesson we learned? Sometimes the strongest warriors aren't the ones who can lift the heaviest weights or punch the hardest. Sometimes they're the ones who can teach an 8-foot-tall chrome alien how to touch their toes without falling over. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm late for my Zumba class. Those hip movements are murder on the servos, but as the humans say, no pain, no gain.